Wow, what an election year. What is going on? Stay with us and hear the thoughts of one of our region's best political minds next on Lakeshore Focus.
Programming is supported by NIPSCO. Today's young minds are constantly reimagining what our world will be like tomorrow. That's why NIPSCO is upgrading its infrastructure now, so we're ready for whatever comes next. More information at nipsco.com/future.
Welcome again to Lakeshore Focus, a weekly show highlighting the key issues, important events, and interesting people in our region. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick. We are in the midst of one of the most interesting political years in the history of this country. The political climate is difficult to describe, but not very pretty. To talk about these issues is one of my most favorite people in the world, and a man whom I admire highly for his knowledge, views, and wisdom. Let's welcome Michael Griffin, who is the Clerk-Treasurer for the Town of Highland. More importantly, one of the most respected elected officials in Northwest Indiana, the state of Indiana, perhaps the country, the world. What do you think,
That's
Michael?
overly generous. I hope I'm worthy of that, but thank you. It is nice to be well thought of. Thank you.
Well, you are highly respected, I know, because people will talk about, what Michael Griffin says and so forth. So I thought there was nobody better in this very weird political year
It is.
to have someone on to talk about what's going on. So what's your assessment? Is this as weird as I think it is?
It feels weird. And people way smarter than me actually will tell you, people who are much better students of this than I am in terms of the politics, say that something unusual has happened. But I sort of think that we're sort of seeing the outgrowth of a number of trends that started to happen that I think have been of great concern to me. And it has to do with the extreme polarization among political ideology. And by that I mean, you could be a Federalist or a Whig or a Democrat or a Republican, and those tended to be places where you felt comfortable with a body of ideas about where you wanted the place of your service to take you. So in my case, it's local government, but it could be state and federal, and you believed that there was a body of ideas that represented, but you didn't believe the other person who adhered to another body of ideas didn't care about the same objective, making the nation better, making the county better, making the municipality better.
When did this polarization start?
Well, it's difficult to tell.
I mean, it seems like it's been going on for a while.
I do think that some of it started at the national level in terms of what I think the late 80s and early 90s, the raging fights between then the Republican numerical minority in the House and the Democratic majority, who would often, by virtue of always being in the majority and making the rules, I think it could be arguably said, if you're fairly assessing it, sometimes didn't give enough regard to the minority view. But that's the fault of anybody in the majority. That was sort of the history of the institution.
It's an interesting distinction you make, though, in terms of that lack of belief that one side still wants the best for the country or the community. It's like one side says, we're right, and you people are destroying everything.
I even see it on friends of mine on Facebook now, just to take you from where it started to where it is. I have many friends in both parties, even people who aren't partisan at all. And some of my partisan friends who are in the Republican Party, I guess I can tell you I'm a Democrat, it was in all the papers, I couldn't hide a thing like that. A lot of those friends worry if they should friend you on Facebook because of what other Republicans will think. That would have never occurred to me. One of my close friends happens to be the chairman of the Republican Party of Lake County, Indiana, Dan Durnall. He's a councilman. We don't agree on a lot of the politics, but I find him a good person who wants to do what's right, and we are friends on a variety of other levels, and I can appreciate that he cares about what's right.
Where does the belief that if I friend you on Facebook and social media, that I'm party to what you believe?
Well, I'm not sure. I think the danger is when we stop talking to people who feel differently.
Right.
If we feel, because firstly, I always like to believe that the open-minded people shouldn't be empty-minded. I come with a set of opinions, In fact, I even go further to say I come with a bunch of presumptions. But for the most part, if I have an open mind, they're rebuttable. But in some cases, you better make a good case, because I didn't come to these positions lightly, so you need to make a case. But I don't believe you don't care about the nation, and I don't believe I can't find a way to get closer to a better nation by taking some of what I like and some of what you like and maybe finding a path. That used to be the ideal. That doesn't mean that the screaming wasn't worse. I'm reading the Hamilton book now, Keith, and I love the book. It's pretty copious, but I love the book. But I'm just reading some of the early assertions that they talked about George Washington, somebody who's revered then and today, and they, accused him at one point of possibly fathering Hamilton, for heaven's sakes. I mean, that's pretty low down when you think about it. So it isn't the accusations themselves that I think are different, because politics can sometimes not be, what is it Harold Washington used to say? It ain't beanbag. It ain't beanbag. But I do think the polarization is a problem, because we have lost the idea that the other person still is the loyal opposition as opposed to the enemy. And I think that that's the real problem with our politics today. So if they're the enemy, there's nothing that can redeem them. You can't even appear to be consorting with them in any way, because that seems like you're betraying your values.
That's what I hear. You'll hear that because of our standing president. If it might be somebody else, maybe the same comments would be made. But I'll hear people make comments about the current president is destroying our country. He's doing things that are just absolutely destroying our country, as if it's intentional. And I keep saying to myself, nobody who aspires to that office, any elected office, I think truly is there to destroy their community, their state. So where does that come from? And I don't recall that being at such a level in the past. Is people really believing someone is intentionally being destructive?
There was, during the 90s, a number of think tanks that promulgated and workshops that assisted with political rhetoric. And there'll be people who are scholars of communication that will do a far better job elucidating this than me. But there was an emerging idea when the Newt Gingrich, for example, was trying to assert leadership, essentially a backbencher for most of his time until he got into leadership as the whip, and then he went and became speaker. And what he needed to do is characterize the majority leadership in such a way that would make them be less palatable. So it wasn't really about ideas. So they would introduce phrases. This was stuff that we know was talked about in workshops, where you characterize them, almost demonizing, where you'd say they're not in the mainstream, where you'd make them the other. And this destroying the nation kind of rhetoric is sort of the natural outflow of that. That you basically use rhetoric in such a way as to make the other person the other, as opposed to another political actor who has a point of view.
What's different today, it seems to me, is that rhetoric, historically, I would hear people go, well, that's just what they say to tear the other side down. It's just part of politics. But today, I hear people chiming in and repeating it and saying, I truly believe it, that it's not even rhetoric, it's the fact, it's fact.
Well, that may be more what we need to work on in our public education systems than what we seem to be consumed by. But that's another topic for another program. Yeah, I find that interesting as well. Politics has always been somewhat a matter of passion and emotion, and I don't think an absence of passion in politics is a good thing either. I think people can be passionate. But I don't think a lot of us have had the kind of socializing influences that help us know how to manage passion. I can be passionate and still civil. I can still deal with you as somebody who feels differently and still believe you're a person of equal dignity, or a person of equal dignity. I think that some of that's lost, and now our politics is almost, at some levels, very visceral, because that's easy to stimulate. And I think that happens when we don't have a clear governing majority. Polarization has made the elections tighter at the national level, and in some states the same as well. When the stakes seem so high and the margins are very close, in order to get attention of what you need, you have to gin it up, and sometimes rhetoric is the tool that's used. So that's not uncommon. It was less likely when there were profound majorities one way or another, but when you have no clear majority, or the governing majority is marginal, within 2 to 4 points, then I think you see a lot of that. And again, I'm not going to try to practice political science. There's probably scholars that could do a better job. But that tends to be what people I respect notice has happened. And that tends to be why the rhetoric is ginned up.
That seems either like an intellectual response to it or a scientific kind of analysis. When that lack of respect or giving somebody just the dignity of having their own opinion and just going, that's your opinion, and I at least recognize that your opinion, seems to be really dissipated. I mean, it's far from, and that seems to be more of an emotional issue. I mean, so what's going on in this country, you think, that's creating that kind of response?
Oh, I do believe that there's a lot of us, I mean, I feel this a little bit myself in my life. There is a kind of an economic dislocation that we're experiencing where the traditional indicators of economic measurement say that we're not only recovering from the recession, a lot of people are doing better. And a lot of jobs are doing better. But there is a measurable decline in what characteristically was described by economists as the middle class, which is arguably the genius of our economy, our capitalist system being based on that. So in my own case, perhaps yours, my parents were both people with high school educations, went to work in labor-intensive industries. My dad in the steel mill, my mother in retail grocery. Both were protected by collective bargaining agreements and were members of collective bargaining groups. And they were able to provide very well for our household. They had not only all of their needs met, but not an inconsiderable amount of their wants, and they were not profligate spenders. And they had a very good life and a very good income at that time, and decent retirements, and that gave them dignity and some degree of independence.
So much of that is gone now.
That's gone, that's correct. And their entry-level jobs might have started at something like whatever the minimum wage was at that time, but it didn't stay that way. And they got to go essentially from their high school period or whatever work life they had before right into industrial jobs that had commanded high pay. Also, the industry was different at that time. It advanced the middle class because you might enter with some absence of skills, but in their need to make things happen, they invested in giving you skills.
So as part of this, you think, just this economic change? I mean, I think there's a real economic change in the world today. People keep going back to the recession, but really in many ways, we're seeing an economic transformation worldwide. Just so many things are different, as well as just, I think, people's expectations. Again, you talk about your parents, my parents, their standard of living was not what people expect today either. So when they're making less money, you'll hear people say, yeah, but I can't afford to buy that third flat screen TV, and I can't pay my Comcast bill, and on and on. And you're like, wow, those are almost, I would consider luxuries that our parents probably said they were fine with one TV, and they were fine with those things.
You and I probably remember the time when there were only 3 broadcast channels and maybe a few UHF, and so it was likely that most of us were watching the same thing if the programming was good. So that's not true
I do
anymore.
remember that.
Yes, good. I do as well. And it's very fragmented. But globalization is a good point. It's sort of what you hinged on there about the economy changing. There's a lot of economists who believe that even though at the margins it's hard to argue for globalization because of the impact it's had in this nation in terms of its wealth and its manufacturing base significantly, in the end it's slightly got a moral imperative because it was one way for stabilization in the world to what used to be called the third world, now the emerging economies, to be able to do better. But I believe that that's being revisited. Our president is an advocate for free trade. Free trade tends to be, it has been almost dogma for the last 20 years. But I think there's another look at that. There's a perception, and it may be valid, that free trade has contributed to the acceleration of the decline of industrial jobs, which were significantly important to the middle class. And there is an argument to be made. It is correct economically to say we need to be able to lower as many barriers as possible to make our goods to be able to be sold everywhere, as well as to be able to buy everywhere, and that ultimately that will redound to our benefit. The problem is that it's not a fair market in some cases. Our country has been very serious about increasing its wealth, but increasingly less at the expense of our environment, for example. And we have collective bargaining rules, which we think are important, which some scholars will argue also contributed to the development of the middle class. That's not true around the world in every place.
But as I listen to you, you really understand a lot of these things. At least you study them. I mean, you attempt to do it. The average citizen doesn't have this kind of comprehension. And so therefore they seem to be very frustrated. And then it comes out in our political system.
Yes, it does.
The kind of a backlash. So how do we get people to understand? I think it's kind of interesting when you say, hey, we're still arguing about globalization. Globalization is here. What's there to argue about? I mean, it's like,
well,
we
maybe
can't
we need to
stop
come
it.
up with a new concept called fair trade as well. That would be a nice idea, where you put everybody in the same place.
But what it all eventually leads to, it seems to me, is what I see is people being very frustrated, and it's being manifest in our political system with the rhetoric and the reactions.
Well, I've thought about this a great deal. I tend to be small c, classically conservative, in that, like most Americans of a certain generation, I tend to favor institutions over the absence of them, although I, from time to time, think that they need to be reworked. It's healthy. That's sort of a context for what I'm about to say. I tended to think that redistricting, with all of its excesses and all the things you could point to that made it difficult at times, I thought should be left in the hands as the law sort of is constructed now. I'm no longer of that bent. I have been convinced that one of our problems at the national level, if you're going to change the rhetoric that political actors are going to engage in, you have to make them much more accountable to us, and I think that means that we have to take some of the excesses that have happened in the computer-based redistricting that allows, it's not gerrymandering now, I'm talking about the computer sophistication that will satisfy the constitutional prerogatives of compact and contiguous, reasonable compact and contiguity, as well as population equality, into such a level that they're able to figure out this district will always be safe for this kind of partisan, and this district may not be. So what happens is you allow the polarized politics to never be altered.
It
reinforces it and it rewards it. So we've got to stop that.
You know what's interesting, as you talked about, you said, I've come to kind of a different conclusion about something I believe differently than I used to. You almost don't hear people say that anymore. It's like, I'm digging my heels in. This is how I believe, and I will never change my opinion about it, no matter what you tell me.
Well,
don't you hear that?
I do hear that a lot, and one of the things I think that we need to, as human beings, is sort of accept the fact that we're finite, that we're as hard as we try to perceive something, we're still within the limits of this existence. And so a little modesty would serve us well. I think it would even serve us well in theology. That's not to say I don't believe in the truths of that.
Too.
Yes, a little humility. So, and I'm a Jean Griffin's son if I'm not anything else, and that's something she instilled in me. So I think that probably people who take that stand should rethink it. I don't know how I make them do that. But I do think that if we're a little bit more modest, as I hope I said at the opening of the program, I have a lot of presumptions. Some of them are strongly felt, but I believe they're all rebuttable if I have truly an open mind. I didn't come to them lightly.
But you have an open mind.
But I have an open mind.
Why have we lost that value of open mind? You value it, I value it. I think our viewers value it. Why does it seem to be lost on a good portion of the public today? They don't seem to have that open mind or even value that open mind.
Well, I'm not sure that's true of everyone. I don't think anybody who doesn't believe, I don't think anybody would like to be considered as having a closed mind. I don't think anybody should have an empty mind.
But don't you think some of them are closed minds?
Well, yeah, I guess or we've not found the device that convinces them to open up and be open to something else. That could be it. And there were a lot of what they used to call leavening institutions that have sort of changed that used to help with that. We're not joiners anymore. We have been ultimately fragmented by the kind of television programming we can get through cable. The internet fragments us a good deal. We create the feeling of friendship in societies, even on Facebook. You friend someone. Well, you're my friend, Keith, in fact. And I don't know if I've friended you on Facebook or not, but you'd be my friend without that.
Yes.
We have friended on Facebook, have we? Yeah.
I keep track of you.
You do keep track of me. Very good. But my point is that there's all these sort of leavening institutions that have sort of experienced some change as well. And so it allows the climate that I think has allowed the political extremes to emerge.
I don't hear these kind of conversations much between kind of everyday people, just like what's going on in the transformation of our economy, the transformation of the world, how things are changing through social media. everybody seems to be kind of reacting to it as opposed to navigating through it. We seem to be just struggling with the storm and trying to keep our ship upright. How do we help people navigate?
I don't know. I do think that we should probably try to have a series of institutions that are committed to helping us in our citizenship. And one of the important tools of citizenship, and in my faith life I think it's also a gift we should have, is critical thinking and discernment. I wish that we had more discernment. Sometimes I think there's people who think they're fighting for a principle and it's really just a deeply held opinion and it looks like a principle. And sometimes not knowing that difference can be some of the trouble between what makes these fights so intense.
We're down to the last couple of minutes, so in this last bit, what advice would you give to people today as we enter into this election cycle, continue the election cycle, for the people who particularly said, I don't think any of the candidates are worthy of my vote?
Well, one is, we elect people who are human beings. If we're seeking the perfect servant, that will always elude us. Remember, we're seeking the best we possibly can of the public servants, and maybe none of them quite fits our palate, but we have a duty as citizens to make that choice. Two, raise our expectations, don't lower them. When you get so cynical that you believe that you don't have any expectations at all, you're likely to get candidates that will meet those. And that's a real pity for our democracy, I think.
Where's your future headed, do you think, with your political...
Well, my biggest job now is to raise Abigail, my daughter. She's 7, and I'm having a good time. She's already kind of understands public life a little bit.
She can be running for public office, you think, one day?
Oh, right now I just want to make sure that she gets through 2nd grade when she starts it, so one thing at a time. But I don't want her to think that that's not an option for her, but I hope that she has horizons as vast as the opportunity this country has given all of us.
So we'll be listening for what you're going to be doing into the future. Last piece of advice to voters out there that you would give them?
Vote. Don't not vote. Even if you feel like that the choices aren't what you prefer, believe me, it's important as a citizen. I believe it's duty. It's our duty. Even though we have the right not to, I think we have a duty to do it. Cast your ballot, try to be informed about that, and then go about your citizenship after those choices are made.
And support who finally gets selected, at least?
Well, yeah. You know, John Wayne was interviewed one time after he was a big endorser of Richard Nixon in the 1960 campaign. John Kennedy had been elected, and he was asked about that. And John Wayne is apocryphally is given to have replied, well, you know, it wasn't the person that I supported, but he's my president now, so I want him to do well. I hope that we all take that kind of advice from John Wayne, at least.
That's a great close, and I know you're a John Wayne fan, so that makes
I am a John Wayne fan.
You got it in there. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate your insights and your thoughts.
Thank you, Keith, for having me very much.
Thanks. I don't think I have witnessed a stranger political climate than the one we are experiencing during this election year. Wait, let me reconsider. The 1972 election between Richard Nixon and George McGovern was pretty bizarre. In 1968, with George Wallace in the mix and Bobby Kennedy assassinated, those are some weird times too. What's interesting about this election cycle is the amount of people saying that none of the candidates deserve my vote. Additionally, they will add, no matter the results, we are going to have a lousy president. When I hear these comments, I am reminded of the saying, you get what you deserve. One can blame our process, but many of us voted in this process, or maybe we didn't. You can say that the system of selecting candidates and determining the presidential outcome is broken, and we cannot fix it. This may be true, but we need to look at the other side of this equation, the political climate. The environment in which our political system operates is comprised of us with our sarcastic comments, cutting remarks, and negative reactions. When we participate with our verbal assaults, hateful criticisms, and unwillingness to listen to other opinions, we are part of this political culture that nurtures personalities who can withstand or even thrive in such an arena. I'm sure you have heard it said, maybe even coming from your mouth, why would anyone in their right mind want to be president? Well then, we get candidates who duck, dodge, and evade the assaults, making them look uncommitted, indecisive, or uninformed, Or we have people who join in the fray by doing the same as the constituents who harshly attack and feed off the negativity. In the end, we get what we deserve. Each week, I challenge our viewers to rethink how they are part of our communities and our cultures. We can choose to participate in positive, constructive ways, or we can join the mainstream. We can be part of the solution, or we can be part of the problem. Which are you? I'm glad you watched Lakeshore Focus today. We sincerely appreciate our viewers. Your comments and reactions to our show help shape our future programming. Send your thoughts to our email address listed on your screen or visit us on our website. If you missed a past show, you can find them on the website by clicking the TV tab and scrolling down until you see my face. There are many great interviews for you to take a look at. Join us next week for another Lakeshore Focus. Until then, I'm Keith Kirkpatrick saying, make a positive difference in our world today.
Programming is supported by NIPSCO. Today's young minds are constantly reimagining what our world will be like tomorrow. That's why NIPSCO is upgrading its infrastructure now, so we're ready for whatever comes next. More information at nipsco.com/future.